Well, I'm excited to be here, and Suzanne asked me to come, I think about a year ago. My husband had just died, and I couldn't imagine anything to do with anything in public. But she said, would you talk about domestic violence? And I immediately, my gut said, yes. I didn't know why at all. It took me a while to figure that out. But now that I figured it out, I'm all the more pleased to be here. And it's a terrible subject, and I don't know why any of you are here. Weren't you all home watching a movie? I mean, who wants to talk about this?
I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I'm going to say, and then I'll say it, and then we'll be done, and we'll ask questions, and that'll be that. We're going to talk about some of the figures, the statistics, not very long, but just a few of those, because it's so daunting and unsettling to even imagine, but I'll throw a few of those out, and we're going to talk about the elements of a domestic violent-laden relationship. There's kind of a common thing that people say in general about this topic. Why don't they just leave? And it's a good question. Why don't they? So we're going to talk more about that. I'm interested not in so much talking about just the abuser or just the receiver of the abuse, but the dynamic between the two of them. Because that's pretty interesting and complicated and more difficult to unravel, but it can be done, and you can free yourself from a relationship that is awful. I really want to express that throughout this whole little time we have. You know, I'm a therapist. If I didn't believe in hope and healing and change, I would be in the wrong business. So I'm always stumping for that. Things are possible. But I'm also here to talk about we have to be safe, and we have to leave when we can. So there's a lot to talk about. Okay, this talk is going to maybe push some buttons of anybody in this room, including mine. So please take good care of yourself. If you find yourself starting to get tense because of things you're thinking about, breathe, please. Good. Me too. Okay. What is domestic violence considered? Is not just occasional violence between people, lashing out, blowing your top, losing it. It's really a sustained dynamic of violence. It's really different than just I got mad at my husband, told him to go to hell. You know, it's worse. It's worse, and that's why we're talking about it. But I do talk a little bit about anger and anger management, where that comes from. All right. Domestic violence crosses all classes. You already know this, but I'll say some things. As social, economic, race, gender, intimate terrorism is more prevalent among the poor because everything is harder when you're poor. You've got more stress in so many ways. But it's certainly not about nationality, and it's not about even gender. African Americans and European Americans have about the same amount of violence in relationships. The National Domestic Violence Hotline, and there's this phone number up at the top if you can read the blue, just if you want that number. They describe it as a pattern of coercive behavior by a competent adult or adolescent to establish and maintain power and control over another competent adult or adolescent, using physical and or sexual violence, emotional abuse, non-consensual sex, or stalking. That's how they see it. Here's some numbers. 38% of victims become homeless in their lifetimes. 25 to 50% of victims of partner abuse have lost their jobs due to domestic violence. The Center for Disease Control, a lot of these figures come from there. It seems like an odd resource, but nevertheless, they've done a lot of, have a lot of mileage in this department. The Center for Disease Control estimates domestic violence has cost the U.S. $8.5 million in mental health and medical services, and this was 15 years ago. So you can imagine, it's probably doubled that now. 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men will suffer from some form of physical or sexual violence in their lifetimes. 1 in 7 women have been injured, 1 in 25 men. 43% of national violence hotline respondents report being coerced into using substances. 26% of gay men report domestic violence. 44% of lesbians report this violence. 61% of bisexuals report being abused by a partner. I don't know how they get this figure. I question that, but nevertheless, that's their figure. 1 in 3, or 37% of bisexual women also experience stalking. 1 in 6 straight women have experienced being stalked. So the bisexual women, and I don't know if it's bisexual women and men, and if there's a difference there, we could really pare it down. And I don't know the answer to that. Bisexual men, bisexual women, I don't know. But nevertheless, it's around the same percentage as Native American and Native Alaskan women. 61% report violence, domestic violence, in their home. And the U.S. has one of the highest rates of death from domestic violence during a pregnancy. Whoa. Yeah. We're not so proud. Physically assaulted women receive, on average, 6 to 9 assaults by the same partner per year. So, we're talking a pattern, not just an occasional whoops. I could go on and on. 50 women per month are shot and killed by a partner in the United States. 22% of high school girls report date violence, 2 or more incidents. These little high school kids, 14, 15, 16, and 32% of college girls, so 10% more of college girls, experience date violence 2 or more times. If this is ringing, some bells for people, yeah, me too. Wife beating was generally accepted, but not illegal until the mid-1800s in this country. It was, what you did. Tennessee, of all states, was the first to outlaw wife beating. Arrests are rare. They were rare, though police sometimes did try to intervene. Until the 1970s, we were there. Thank you, feminist movement. It made a huge difference. Because of the women's movement, 1974 passed the Family Violence Prevention and Response Act, making domestic violence an automatically arrestable offense. Even if the victim doesn't want to press charges, still somebody can be. And pretty incredible. It's also the ground for removal of the children from the home, which it had not been before. And we'll talk a little bit about the effect of domestic violence on kids. Attention to violence against men, and we'll remember this, I suppose, a lot of us, came in the 80s as a result of the church abuse, the little altar boys, and what happened to all of them. And that was the first time. And so men began to be able to come out and talk. It was too shameful for a man to even say before that. So, and it still is, but it's better. The heart of this, the classic scene is, how about this? A couple who started out with a romance. And I cringe. I've had couples where the woman says, "He treats me like a queen. He doesn't let me do anything. He does everything for me." And she's entranced for some weird reason. After the initial pheromone blooming, usually about 3 months, the gloss is wearing off and our deeper, more vulnerable selves begin to emerge. Okay, now, with a healthy couple, there is the ability to hold boundaries, the ability to tolerate or even exult in the difference the other has. Oh, that's so great. You're a 49ers fan. I'm a Boston Celtics fan. That's basketball, but that's how much I know. Yeah, it's great. We're different. Isn't that wonderful? That's a healthy relationship. There are communication tools used, and maintained, and people make and keep agreements with each other. That's so healthy. A willingness to reach out, to solve problems, to learn what the other needs, to feel loved. Wow, really. My favorite example is a couple I had from Covelo, and he loved her so much. This is not an example of domestic violence at all. It was a very sweet couple. They didn't end up working out, but he loved her so much. He knew what she needed for Christmas. He bought her a carburetor. He thought it was such a great present. She didn't think it was such a great present. Really? Healthy couples learn how to love each other and how to ask for the love that they want. They even know what kind of love they like and want, and they can ask for it. That's a healthy relationship. And how many of us in this room grew up with parents who acted that way with each other? Acted loving and communication skills, and how lovely. Okay, that's one person in this whole room, maybe two. Now, by contrast, the ugly part. Okay. The domestic violence usually begins with the abuser bestowing attention and affection. He loves me to death. He treats me like a queen. As real life takes over, there is an incremental breakdown of loving behaviors. From equality, if there ever is equality, in decision making, dominance, control. This is about dominance and control. This is really about that. We could say it's about stealing someone's soul, but we can talk about dominance and control. So, and the reason why the person who is trying to dominate and take control and manipulate and isolate their partner is because they feel terrible and empty and small inside. And it's really 100% that way. They're never going to tell you that. And we get snookered in because so often abusers in the beginning are so charming. You know, they're not awful in the beginning or we wouldn't be with them. They buy you flowers and candy, and I'm not against anybody buying anybody flowers and candy, but it is a lure. When it's a lure, and the person doesn't know, it's like, that's so lovely, that's so nice. But then if it begins to deteriorate, that's what we can then begin to call domestic violence. And what happens then, it's often, what sets in is a hopelessness. And she feels like she can never be submissive enough. She can never please this guy enough. She tries to buy the right everything and dress this way and do everything that he wants. And it could be she, for sure. But that's the pattern, and it's like the frog in the water, you know, it just kind of the frog gets used to the water little by little by little until I had a couple that I remember seeing in Seattle. Great big guy. You know, he wasn't like an evil demon, but he was a big guy who was very important and full of himself. And she was very sweet and very pretty, and she tried her damnedest to do everything he wanted. She said she would stand at the grocery store for 15 minutes trying to think of what bread he might want. You know, that's not, is that violent? You know, it's not illegal to insist that somebody buy the right kind of bread or else. She said she'd walk into the door and he would tell her where to sit. He wanted her to sit in that chair or over here. And she went along with it. That was, I mean, it's just sometimes so shocking. He didn't beat her up. Nope. He just did that, and she allowed it. Before they stopped coming in, or they didn't come in, she came in. She was busting out. She went with her father to Hawaii for a vacation against his rules, and she went anyway. It was a great triumph. Well, I think this is a good time for me to hand out. Can you hand those out? I've got this good old power and control wheel thing. You can look at it. It's not the be all and the end all, but I think it's pretty good. It's kind of a helpful thing. So this dynamic is not just about punching somebody in the eye, you know, as it shows. There's a lot of ways to try to control another person. So financially, sexually, socially, just withholding love is a big way and just withdrawing. And I'm not going to love you unless you do what I want. I'm going to turn my back on you. I'm going to just sulk until you come around. This works perfectly. This is the perfect storm. This works perfectly with somebody who is willing to do all of that. And let's talk about that person, the other kind of emptiness, where a person wants that approval and attention so badly that they are willing to put up with someone who is putting them down or insulting them or belittling them or blocking their way, all of the ways they're willing. Why? Here's the question. Why would they stay? Why does anybody stay? So now we're going to talk about female politics. The politics of being a female, how we have been trained up to not be. Now you can go to Penny's and get little girl's T-shirt that says "Girl Power." But we older people in the room, we didn't have T-shirts that said that. This is a new, exciting thing. Okay, it's great to be a girl. But the way I was raised, it was, well, if you're going to be a girl, you better be really pretty and really nice and be good at picking strong, powerful boyfriends, because they were your power source. It wasn't from yourself. I'm speaking kind of in extremes, but, you know, we've all been exposed to that. So even if we think we're beyond that, there's some place in us maybe that buys into this notion that someone else should control us, someone else knows better, someone else has, what is the word I want, has earned the right to your allegiance, your loyalty. Women are also taught that we are the nurturers, and we sometimes pick fixers, fixer-uppers. You know, I've been here. That wonderful guy. He's so smart. He has the soul of an angel. He's such a good guy. He's brilliant. And he's an ass to other people or to his boss or friends or family. But we see the real guy, and if we just love him enough, he'll be fine. We'll cure him. We'll just soften him up, you know. I don't know. I think the first therapy office I worked in had a sign on the bulletin board: "We do not accept fixer-uppers in men," or something. It was something like that. It was so little clever the way it was, but that's the gist. We're endless cornucopia of nurturing, and if the person we're with is belligerent or crude or anything that is not respectful, we just should be nice about it, right? We should just go along. And now maybe we better go along, because if we don't go along, okay, I mean, I have known several people who were literally kicked out in the cold and the rain and the snow, kicked out because they didn't go along. We're talking about not a father and daughter, but, you know, two people, two adults, or the kids. I'm going to stay here because it's not safe for my kids. If we leave, I have no place to go. So we have to stay here. And I came from a broken home, quote unquote, broken home. And I don't want my kids to have a broken home. So I'm going to stay, and we'll make it okay. I'll patch it up. I'll sleep with him enough, or I'll make him just the kind of pancakes he wants. And then he won't go off on me and the kids or in front of the kids. You know, there are these sort of stories that go on and on. I don't know if it's better or not. I don't know. Let's hope. Now, the woman who takes it is not just this little victim. The woman who takes it or the man who takes it, they can be terrible pills, and they are not just shrinking violence. This could be somebody who allows abuse, but it's so familiar to how she grew up that she can very well egg the guy on, or egg the person on. Egg him on. Let's get this fight going. Let's get this fight going. As they say, bad breath's better than no breath, you know, like, okay. So I'm going to make sure I get this fight going, because at least that's attention. I get attention that way. So keep that fight going. Keep that fight going. Keep that scab picked off that sore place. Just keep it up and keep it up. And because I know this guy's going to blow up, and then he's going to hurt me, and then I can feel really like a victim. Am I making you all really sick right now? It's sickening. It is sickening. I mean, we're really talking about mental illness here. You know, it is really mental illness, and it's a very sad thing. Yeah, I just want to stress how powerless both people feel. The abuser feels very powerless. The abuser is so scared that that person's going to leave them that they, being a mentally ill sort of thing, they do all the wrong things to keep the person there, like threaten them and block them and isolate them. And, you know, on the surface, it does not look like a powerful person. It looks like powerful over the powerless. But he's really as powerless as she is, or the other person is. They're both really powerless. The person who is belligerent and violent is terrified of being abandoned himself or herself. Terrified. And because it's mental illness, you do all the wrong things. If it was a healthy thing, you would do the right things to get what you want, to feel loved. But it's backwards. It's backwards when you're that kind of, I'm going to say, deprived from early years. You're empty, and you're mad that person isn't going to fill in your inner emptiness. The one taking it feels like, I guess this is all I can get, or this is all I'm worth. Gee, that's what Dad did to Mom, or Mom did to me, or Grandpa did to, you know, old family patterns. Now, in a healthy relationship, people get mad, and they know how to get mad. They say, I'm mad, and they say, I don't want to talk right now. I'm too mad. I'll talk later. And they stump off, and they take a shower, or take a walk, or listen to music, or dance around, or paint beautiful pictures. They do something else besides escalate and make it worse. But that can happen in a healthy relationship, and it's wonderful, and we can all do better at managing our anger, I'm sure, probably everybody in this room, in some sort of way. But I learned how to not act out in awful ways by teaching a class to women on domestic violence and anger management. Oh, now I started applying it in my own life. The way I used to get mad was to throw pots and pans. And after a while, all my pans, none of the lids fit anymore. They were all these lumpy, they were all thrown down. I stopped doing that. It was very, very advanced of me. What I want to get to here also is personality disorders. These are the people who, they're not really very good at saying, gee, I feel really mad right now and I need to take a break. Oh, let's talk after dinner. They are people that, I want to say, if you get near someone like this, walk quickly in any other direction. Just leave, go away. They are very difficult to be around. And I'm just going to say a few of them. Narcissists. You know, all these are in the news a lot now. Now, I'm going to say all these, and they're not necessarily violent at all. Just because you have a personality disorder does not mean that you beat up your friend. It doesn't mean that. But it means that if you have a personality disorder, it's more easily done to get riled up. So a narcissist, with their lack of empathy for others, for their insatiable need for attention, for their deep shame and emptiness, and you were supposed to fill them up. You were supposed to adore them and admire them and give them attention, and that's their food. And you keep feeding them, but they're never filled up. So they're exhausting to be around. They might get violent. Not necessarily at all, but they want to manipulate and control you. They absolutely do. They need you to be who you want them to be. You know, I want someone that's always there for me and makes dinner, or I want someone who dances till midnight And who you are is not really important to them. It's who they need you to be that's important. That's all that's important. You know, the expression now that goes around, it's all about you, or it's not all about you. This is the classic narcissist. It is always about them. Well, the antisocial personality disorder, also in the news in bad ways, very bad ways. I would say walk the other way. These folks do not have empathy for you or others. They lack a functioning conscience. They really can do bad things. I had a little boy in my office this week who said, I want to be a policeman when I grow up. Oh, how come? Because then when my dad steals something, I can make him put it back. This is Daddy who's in prison. You know, it just breaks your heart. You know, I have not met this guy, but no doubt he's an antisocial guy. They had inadequate attachment. They did not attach in the beginning, and that's sort of a make or break kind of thing if you get proper attachment to your early caregivers, mommy, daddy, grandma, whoever it was, then you're going to be all right. But if you don't get that, you know, it's pretty hard to make it up later. So antisocial personality disorders are quite prone to violence. They don't care. Okay, borderline personality people. Oh my God. They have a huge, also, inner emptiness, which can never be filled, but they want to try. Antisocial might, he or she, more likely they don't want to try, but they might want sex or money or something from you quick, but then they're not in there for a real relationship. A borderline personality disorder person wants to be in a relationship with you, but they're going to love you, and then they're going to hate you, and then they're going to love you, and then they're going to hate you. And they're always in drama with other people. There's just an endless, like, soap opera city here with these folks. They also have this terrible fear of being abandoned. That's kind of their core thing. They're so afraid of being abandoned that they will grab you and not let you go. They will threaten to commit suicide, or they will about to maybe jump out of the car on a speeding freeway. Very prone to that. Self-destructive behavior, and a lot of it is to manipulate others so they could, try to guilt trip you. If you try to leave, then I'm going to do this terrible thing to you or to myself or to the dog, or, it's just, it's crazy. It's very, very crazy, and it can get more psychotic or a little more manageable. There's all of these things have ranges, but not a pretty picture. Yeah, a lot of suicidal threats. Okay, then we have the dependent personality disorder, who is, of course, not complete myself because I need this other person, so I'm willing to put up with stuff. I'm willing to put up with violence or intimidation or control because I'm not okay by myself. I can't function on my own. So, of course, then you make terrible decisions. Your decisions are compromised about who you spend time with. It's more than when we think of codependent personalities. There is codependence, but a dependent personality is really far into not feeling whole unless they know that you need them. They need you to need them. So need with like 4 E's. Need. Oh boy. The last one I'm going to say is bipolar, which is not considered a personality disorder. It's considered a mood disorder, but it is very similar to borderline personalities in that there's, again, that famous manic phase, up and down, depression, impetuosity, up and down, and that, of course, is very hard to be around for anybody. It's... catch them on a good day and it's great, and then they'll go off, and again, just because you have or have been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, you can learn how to actually moderate your feelings and your thoughts. There's some wonderful treatment out these days that I love and I esteem. Marsha Linehan up in Seattle started it. It's called dialectical behavioral therapy, and it works really, really well. It's very effective, and it's a lot of mindfulness, learning to notice a big feeling and working with it. What can I do when I'm having this big feeling? So these are not all hopeless, and especially somebody with a bipolar disorder, maybe they are willing to come in and talk to somebody like a counselor. They're willing to work with their partners. They're willing to try some new behaviors, you know, especially with some of this good therapy that's out there for people. So anyway, and again, all of these personality disorders just make it harder to be in a cooperative, fair, just, loving relationship with somebody. It doesn't mean that that person is necessarily violent at all, but they will be trouble in your life. Big trouble. Okay, I wanted just to say a couple of kind of main themes along with what I've been talking about, and that's just the concept of shame. When we hear a lot about it, and it's good for people to talk about it. It's good for shaming sort of feelings to come out of the closet, and they're key. I think it's the feeling of being shamed or feeling shameful is key in people staying in bad relationships. It's, you don't want anyone to know. You're embarrassed. What if the people at my church or my neighborhood or my mom or anybody knew? You know, so with shame then comes secrets and hiding, and things get weird, just really weird and sad. And the other is anger. And I used to be so angry that I'm really good at teaching other people to not have, you know, to have good skills. I feel like I'm a real expert. And we can all learn these good communication skills. We can all learn these tools. With a personality disorder person, they're probably not going to want to learn because they don't believe that there's something wrong with what they're doing. It's all your fault. You know, they had to yell because you left the shoes on the floor or whatever. They're very likely to change, but we can change. We can give it a try to learn how to calm ourselves down and do belly breathing. And if we're in the room with somebody who is really difficult, we can say, you know what, I need to leave right now, and then we can leave right now. And maybe it'll work out, and we can come back and we can talk. But for now, we don't try to change the other person. We just get to do what's good for us. And that'll keep us busy enough. Here's the other reason, besides my great civic attitude, is that I was in an abusive relationship for 4 years. And that's what punched me in the gut when Suzanne said, hey, you want to talk about domestic violence? And for a couple of reasons, you know, and I don't know all that. I'll be reflecting on this night for a while probably, but I was a therapist for years. And I have been in relationships my whole life with really nice people who weren't awful at all, who behaved themselves. You know, we didn't always get along, but, you know, I was married for a long time to a very nice guy. But I was snookered. And people on the surface we're all wonderful. We're all nice, and we're at this level of communication, and we have our persona, and that's good. But, you know, it takes living with somebody, you know, and the mask starts to fall off, and then you begin to, you know, then the real work starts. The other is just a pheromone ride. So one of the things that, a couple of things that got me snookered. Number one, this partner was a woman. Like, women aren't violent. Women are nice. We're friendly, and we like unicorns and hearts and date night movies, and, you know. Oh, man, except that this one wasn't like that at all, but she was attractive. smart, capable, very talented at many things. I was totally charmed by this person, and it took a little while before I became pulled into an old psychic element from my childhood. I didn't know why it was okay to be slammed against a wall, but it felt so familiar. It was so familiar and I went into this other time zone that connected me with when I was very little, when I was a little bitty girl, and I would get, not well treated by my mother. But I didn't get that at the time. I didn't get that. I thought, oh no, if I'm just really nice and I'm a therapist and I'm going to be loving and create this safe, nurturing environment and it'll be great. Yeah, so see, I'm just as snookered as anybody after having been a therapist for years. So I'm just saying, people are good. People are good. They can fool. We can fool each other. So, after a while I was thinking, how in the world am I going to get out of this? But we had bought a house together. And I wanted that house. I did not want to be out on the street. I had a whole history of too many houses. I wanted this house and this stability, and I couldn't figure it out. And this became a very bad situation. And one of my kids said, Mom, she's not going to change. And my dear friend I've had for years said, she's not going to change. Get out. And I wasn't ready, and I don't even want to go into some of the horrible details, but it was not good, and I didn't know how much I would want to even say tonight, but I'll just say it was not good. And physically, emotionally, being yelled at because I didn't spoon the dog food out of the dog food can in the right way. I mean, really? Oh my God, just nuts. So, and here's the deal. It took me to that moment of resolve. Okay, I'll leave the house. The house I'm more important than the house. I love my house, and it will be so sad, but I came to that point. And it was, of course, at that magic moment when she said, well, I'm leaving. Like, oh, my God. She left, and I'm still in my house, and I'm happy. I love my house. But I had to risk losing my house. It had to, kind of like the strip bear on the mountain with the storm, and you're just risking all of this. You're at the the high point of insanity and tragedy, and the electricity might kill you. But there you are. You have to stand there naked in the wind. So that was me. So I have learned since that adds to my compassion and empathy for other people. If it can happen to me, it can happen to you, and of course it won't happen to you. You're all smarter than I am, but you might know someone who is stuck in a really hard place, and we don't say, why don't you just leave? Because that person has to get to that place that I got to of resolve. And so I'll say what we can do to help people get to that point of resolve. Do not get in there and rescue them. Do not rescue them. I'll just say it. Do not rescue them. It's like with AA. You can't do that. You can say, I believe in you. You can do it. Do not get in there. Do not try to go to their house and help them get out of there. Someone else can do that. Someone else can do that, but not you. You may be putting yourself in danger if you do that, frankly. That would not be good. So, but you're showing yourself as a good role model. You make being alive a good thing, and that's the best you can do. It's a wonderful thing you can do. Make being alive look really appealing so that they are inspired by you to get the hell out. In this area, you can call Project Sanctuary, and if you are in Willits, you tell them you're from Willits, and there is a woman, and I can't remember her last name, I'm so sorry, but her name is Lydia. And she's right here! Oh my God! Yay! And you can give her your phone number, and you can talk and connect with her, because she leads groups, and maybe you want to say something in a minute about that. But it's meant to be discreet and safe, of course, and that's why we don't have a big picture of where she meets and when. But that's a resource. And Project Sanctuary will. They're wonderful, and you go there and they will help you fill out paperwork. They have bilingual staff. They are free, and they're kind, and there's literature back there, some little calling cards. Take whatever you want, and this is their phone number if you don't have that, just so maybe you have it on hand in case you run into somebody. You know, I was just talking to somebody at ACE. I was talking to Martine at ACE Copping, and he said, oh, yes, we've seen couples out there screaming and fighting in the parking lot, you know, the Safeway parking lot. You never know who you might run into who is in dire straits and doesn't know who to turn to. So, okay, that's a good place to stop for questions, huh?
I'm with the Seroptimists, and the Seroptimists prepare a directory every year, and this year we have focused on human trafficking awareness. Every January we do a human trafficking awareness presentation in the high schools, and this year we also focused on going to the middle schools, because we know that children in middle school are targets of human trafficking. Well, also this year we decided that domestic violence was very important to couple with the human trafficking emphasis, because they're both about dominance, you know, taking someone's life over and dominating. Well, as we got into the schools, we weren't comfortable, we didn't feel comfortable after our human trafficking presentation. We didn't know exactly how to, like, segue into domestic violence, because that really hits sort of close to home for a lot of these children. I would like to know for next year when we do it again, we need to know how to address domestic violence with them in a way that they feel empowered to seek help, or they feel understood, or that they have someone they can turn to. And we have this, you know, this page in our directory that we prepare every year. Now it's got all the information about Project Sanctuary, and, you know, calling the police, and, you know, like rape counseling, all the things that go along with being dominated by someone. So that's my question, is how can you correlate, or how can you, like, reach out to a child who you can tell has that issue?
Junior high schools are certainly not you know, they're not emotionally safe places. Nobody feels safe. Even popular kids don't feel safe in junior high. But kids could have, if you have pages in the phone book, or a bulletin board near the office in the school, that could be, so a kid could discreetly write a phone number down, because they don't want to stand out. And really, it isn't always safe for kids to turn their parents in. Very bad things can happen in a family, and, you know, it's more than being brave. It might be not smart for them to turn people in, but if you're 12 and up, you can get counseling without parents' permission. So you could come in orally through the high school and all. Mendocino Youth Project, she's great, and there's a few of us in town. Yeah, a kid could go in and say something to their counselor at school. But again, there's a caveat with that, with it backfiring on the kid, and we don't want that.
There is something that passed a few called CHIA, California Healthy Youth Act, and that requires the schools to offer some of these trainings. And there's like 11 topics listed in that law that says what needs to be covered. One's in middle school and one's in high school. And some of the topics listed there are human trafficking and healthy relationships, consent. So Project Sanctuary does have a prevention and outreach program, and we do go out to schools and offer similar trainings to what you're talking about. Well, we go into the schools that allow us to go into. Not all of them allow us to go into and talk about these difficult topics. But we're also crisis counselors, so if a child does, we always do a disclaimer, and we give students we let them know it's okay to step out if something is triggering. But we're also the crisis counselors, so we're able to help at the moment if needed, which is helpful. But the way we address domestic violence in these presentations is we talk about healthy relationships. Because what is the opposite of a domestic violence relationship? It's the healthy relationship. And if my relationship doesn't look like that, and it looks like the opposite, without me saying it's domestic violence, kids start to realize what those patterns are. And we always give an option to ask questions anonymously, and then answer them and come back to them. That way no one in the room, no student knows who asked that one question, so they don't get labeled. Being the crisis response center, I have a cell phone that they can text me at, because we've also worked at schools. So if a school allows us to be there and offer groups to process some of these topics, we are, one of our staff would do that. And that's a good way to process, and the kids can text and say, "Are you available? Can I come talk to you?" And we say yes, but that we work out with the school because we know we're all mandated reporters and everything.
I'm Jed Diamond, and Melinda and I are counselors in the area. And I just want to appreciate you in a couple of things, and I want to add a piece, which is how widespread these issues are and how much it touches our community. And also, you gave statistics that this is not a gender issue, that men also have been and are in abusive relationships. And like you, Melinda, and you shared, I also found myself in an abusive relationship. Also a counselor who'd been counseling people for 10 years. Although I knew the statistics that it could happen to men, I didn't believe that it could happen to me until I was in an abusive relationship. And as I read over this, the power and control wheel that you gave out, all the examples are female. Every one of the, so as I just share that, because I think unless we're aware and we talk about it, and there is a stigma, anybody talking about it, there's a special kind of stigma that I know about men talking about it. So I was just looking at the first box, using intimidation. It says, making her afraid by using looks, actions, gestures, smashing things, destroying her property, abusing pets, displaying weapons. And what I remember is when my wife, just so everybody knows it isn't Carlin, this is before Carlin and I were together, slashed my tires, threw my glasses out of the window, sat at the table after we'd had a fight, sharpening a knife, and then just smiling at me with a very deadly look, telling me, "You better not fall asleep tonight." So I just want everybody to aware, because there's a connection. You know, people that grow up in families that are abusive as children often, end up either in an abusive relationship as adults, not always, but it happens, there's a connection. And that if you were in an abusive relationship as a woman, sometimes you then get into an abusive relationship as a victim, or sometimes a perpetrator. And guys happen too. Now, when I let this be known, what I can tell you is a lot of guys started coming out and talking to me about, yeah, it happened to me too. And I didn't know it was okay to talk about it until I heard you talk about it. So I thank you and appreciate everybody just being aware when you look at this wheel. Take it through at one time where you substitute her for him and see whether you notice anybody in your own life or anybody you know who might be a him in this wheel. Thanks.
You touched on some of the different mental illnesses. You know, here's the bipolar. You know, you meet this person and he's acting normal for maybe a few months. Depending on his cycle, you meet the narcissist with the egotistical concepts, etc. How the hell do you know? When can you decide this is a commitment, this person is going to be complying to the...
Take your time. Take your time. Don't get stuck in anything, you know. I mean, I foolishly bought a house with this person.
I didn't realize the joking that... my father was perpetrating on my, I didn't call her stepmother because I was already older and had my own family and lived, had my own home. But we'd go to dinner there, and she would make these beautiful dinners and service, and she'd walk by and he'd say, "Get your fat butt out of the way." But I mean, he was very loving to her, but those were very sort of smiley kind of jokes. And after about the third dinner that I had there, I just blew up. And I said, "Dad, if you say one more thing to her that is negative about her butt, her boobs, her belly, whatever, I'm not coming here ever again." Because it was abusive, and it took me about 3 or 4 dinners to realize what was happening to me inside when he kept saying these things in a loving, smiling voice. I think that's abuse. Would you say that that's...
Somebody else might not mind. Some people come from cultures...
Some people come from cultures that are much more explosive, and it's kind of accepted. How close you are to somebody, how loud you can be. It depends on your family, what you're used to. So... we don't want to judge other cultures by our own culture, But it is just like you're saying. How do you feel being yelled at or blocked or laughed at or your ass or any of that? It's how. Yeah, we're the final judges.
My name's Chris Martell. Listening to everybody, I appreciate it. One of the things that just came to my mind is I believe we have a hugely dysfunctional society that perpetuates the idea of the bullying person as a power person. And, well, it can be, that can be, sort of portrayed as, well, that's a power person, but at the same time, we see it in school, we see it in jobs, we see it in politics. And I think as a culture, we have to say, no, it's not funny, it's not powerful, it's not acceptable. And create boundaries around it. That's just one of the areas that I think that domestic violence comes in, because people think it's funny, or this is how I get to have friends and followers. So I just think bullying is a really sort of, we call it bullying, but I think it's a lot more than that.
I've had the chance to go to Cuba a bunch of times, and I was having a wonderful conversation with the head of the Havana Cuban Federation of Women, and she was asked about domestic violence in Cuba, and she said, well, here's the deal. We went to an international conference when they first started having them. I think this one was in China, and this is 20 years ago now, and she said, we were asked, Cuba is this sort of paragon of a fair society and equality. They strive for that. And she said, but we didn't know. We had no really research on it. So she said we left and we got real busy and we found out a bunch of things so that next year when we came back, we were able to answer. She said, no, we really don't have domestic violence in Cuba, very little. She said, but we have psychological violence, is what she called it. She said, here's an example. The father and the mother both work, and the father comes home first, and the kids are there, and instead of starting to make dinner, he sits on the couch and reads the paper, and when she comes in, the kids are hungry and he hasn't done anything. That's psychological violence. I thought, oh my God, these people are so advanced. Isn't that incredible? So all these more subtle levels, you know. Well, thank you. I wish you all safety and happiness in your lives. Thanks for coming tonight.